It was a still morning, the kind where silence feels almost sacred, when Harold, 81 years old, leaned back in his weathered rocking chair and spoke words that gave his daughter pause. "You know," he said with a small, knowing smile, "I feel lighter today than I did when I was 30. She laughed softly, assuming a joke was coming, perhaps a quip about shedding a few pounds or finally beating his old golf score. But Harold wasn't talking about his body. He was talking about his heart. That morning, he had done something few people ever do, not once in their youth, not through middle age, and often not even in their final decades. He let go, not of a thing or a person, but of a habit, a mental pattern, a belief system he'd carried like armor, thinking it protected him. It had become so much a part of him that he didn't notice the weight it added. And yet, in the moment he finally set it down, something shifted. What he found in its place was something more surprising and more rare than anyone expected: peace. The beauty of aging is often overlooked. Beneath the inevitable changes in body and pace lies something many miss: clarity. Each year doesn't just bring a new birthday, it brings a fresh layer of understanding, often hard-won through the lessons of relationships, challenges, disappointments, and personal evolution. We start to see, often for the first time, that much of what we thought made us strong, our stubborn habits, our mental defenses, our persistent striving, were not keeping us whole. They were keeping us trapped. We believed these layers were part of who we were. In reality, they were picked up over time, some to guard against pain, some to win approval, and some simply to feel safe in a world that felt too unpredictable. And as life begins to slow, something precious happens. The noise quiets. That rare silence gives us the chance to ask, what am I still holding that I don't need? What habits once served me but no longer belong? This reflection isn't reserved for the elderly. It's available to anyone ready to live with more lightness, more clarity, more peace. Because peace, as it turns out, doesn't always come from adding, building, striving. Sometimes it comes from subtraction, from doing less, not less living, but less defending, less resenting, less comparing. When you speak with people who have lived long lives, not just in years, but in awareness, they'll often tell you that real joy came not from what they gained, but from what they finally surrendered. In this video, we'll walk through 9 habits that many older adults have chosen to let go of, gently, bravely, and with intention. These aren't sweeping lifestyle overhauls. They are quiet, internal shifts, yet they carry incredible power. Each of them has opened the door to a life that feels not like enduring, but like living. And I hope you'll stay with me until the very end, because habit number 9 is the one most people don't even realize they're carrying. And yet, once it's released, it can bring a kind of inner stillness you may not have felt in decades. Let's begin with the first habit, the need to be right. This one doesn't always show itself with arrogance or ego. Often, it begins innocently. You correct someone gently, thinking you're being helpful. You offer your point of view to clarify, to explain. Maybe you press a little harder in a debate, driven by a desire for accuracy. At first, it feels like truth-seeking. But slowly, without even realizing it, the motive shifts. The need to be right starts to feed something else entirely. It stops being about clarity and becomes about control. It becomes about fear. The fear of being misunderstood, of being unseen, of losing significance. And the longer we let this habit settle in, the more it costs us. Conversations become colder. Dinners grow quieter. What used to be shared laughter turns into tension. The victories we gain in arguments leave behind wounds far deeper than we intended. George, a retired accountant in his late 70s, shared a memory that stayed with him for years. My brother and I argued about everything: sports, politics, even who Mom liked more, he said with a wry smile. I thought it was just brotherly sparring, being smart. But after he passed, I didn't remember any of the wins. I remembered the silences that followed, I'd give anything to have one more talk, an easy one, not a debate, just a laugh. There's a kind of wisdom that reveals itself only when we realize that being right and being close are not the same thing. In fact, sometimes they're at odds. Wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. It knows that letting a disagreement go isn't weakness, it's strength. It's choosing harmony over pride. And when you finally release the compulsion to prove yourself, something remarkable happens. You become free. You connect more deeply, and you feel the kind of peace that comes not from being the most correct person in the room, but from being the most compassionate one. Now we move to the second habit, holding grudges. Grudges are deceptive. They feel justified, even empowering. You tell yourself their boundaries, proof that you're strong, that you won't be hurt again. But over time, a grudge becomes something heavier, something more personal. Quietly, it tightens around the heart, calcifying it in places. And instead of protecting your peace, it erodes it. What begins as a single moment of pain slowly turns into a full narrative. In this story, the other person is always wrong, and you're always the victim. It gives you a sense of control. But in truth, the longer you hold that story, the more it begins to hold you. Helen, a 74-year-old mother of 3, opened up about something she hadn't shared before. Years ago, she and her cousin, once inseparable, stopped speaking over a small inheritance dispute. It wasn't about the money, she said. It was about the feeling of betrayal. I held on to that hurt like it was mine to guard. Then one day, while going through old photos, she saw a picture of the two of them as children, laughing, unaware of the years to come. She cried, not for her cousin, but for who she herself used to be. I miss the version of me who wasn't angry. That moment led her to something she never expected, forgiveness. Not for her cousin's sake, but for her own. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook, releasing yourself from the cycle of replaying pain. Most older adults who have let go of long-standing grudges say the same thing. I wish I had done it sooner. Because forgiveness doesn't always change the other person, but it always changes you. It frees up space for joy, for lightness, for presence. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It means deciding not to carry pain that was never meant to be permanent. The third habit is one of the most common and the most misunderstood, worrying about the future. At first glance, worry seems responsible. It looks like planning, foresight, maturity. You tell yourself you're just being careful, that if you think hard enough, plan well enough, anticipate every possible scenario, you'll somehow stay ahead of life. But the deeper truth is this. Worry doesn't protect you from the future. It only drains the present. It spreads the weight of imagined problems across all your days, whether those problems ever arrive or not. Many people only begin to see the pattern as they age. They look back and realize they braced for storms that never came. They lost sleep over things that never materialized. And in the process, they miss the calm days, the good ones, the ones right in front of them. Albert, now 80, was once a builder. He said, "In my 50s, I worried about getting sick. In my 60s, about my kids' choices. In my 70s, about running out of money. And now, in my 80s, I realize most of the things I feared never happened or weren't as bad as I imagined, but I still lost good meals and good sleep over them." Caring about the future isn't the problem. The problem is letting that concern become a cloud that blocks today's sun. You can care about your health without fearing every symptom. You can support your children without trying to control their every decision. You can be financially responsible without panicking over every expense. True peace comes not from securing every possible outcome, but from being present, truly present, right now. Letting go of worry doesn't mean abandoning wisdom. It means abandoning the illusion that fear makes you safe. It never does, but gratitude can. Presence can. A walk, a deep breath, a conversation with someone you love. These things ground you. And when you stop filling your head with what-if scenarios, you start seeing the blessings you already have. If you're still with me, drop a number 3 in the comments. And if this message resonates, consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you never miss a video. Your support truly means everything and helps us keep creating content that uplifts, encourages, and helps bring peace into your life. Let's keep moving. Next is habit number 4, comparing yourself to others. This habit is subtle. It starts with questions that seem harmless. Did I do enough? Am I as successful as others my age? Why do they look so happy? But these questions rarely come from curiosity. They come from comparison. And comparison has a quiet, devastating power. It steals joy. It makes you question your own blessings. You see someone else's child achieving more and wonder if yours should be further along. You hear about a friend's travels and suddenly feel like you've missed out. You scroll through social media and unknowingly measure your life against someone else's highlight reel. At first, it may feel like admiration, but slowly it turns into self-doubt, into subtle shame. And the joy you once felt for your own life begins to slip through your fingers. Many older adults say this habit lingered far longer than they realized. Joanne, 77, shared a story about her best friend who began traveling the world after retirement. I was happy for her, Joanne said, but I'd come home, sit in my garden, and feel like I was missing something. Until one day, my granddaughter sat next to me and said, "Grandma, your backyard is my favorite place in the world." That changed everything. I realized that this small garden had given me something rich: time, roots, connection. The truth is, life has no universal timeline, no scoreboard, no final grade. What brings one person peace may not work for another, and that's not failure. That's freedom. When you stop comparing, you start noticing. You begin to see your own blessings, your own rhythm, your own version of success. Not through someone else's lens, but through your own. Gratitude grounds, comparison distracts, and letting go of the habit of measuring your life against others is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim joy that has been yours all along. As we move further into these subtle yet transformative habits, there's something quietly powerful that begins to emerge. Not just a sense of clarity, but a reclaiming of space. Space in the mind, in the body, in relationships. Letting go doesn't always feel dramatic. In fact, it often arrives in whispers, in the silence between obligations, in the quiet no that makes room for a more honest yes, in the simple act of no longer forcing yourself into shapes that no longer fit. We now turn to the next habit, one that speaks to the way we relate to others, not through love or generosity, but through guilt. Habit number 6, saying yes when your heart means no. For many, especially those who've spent a lifetime nurturing, caregiving, or holding communities together, the impulse to say yes becomes automatic. It becomes an instinct, a reflex deeply ingrained from years of being told that good people are selfless, that love means sacrifice, that saying no is somehow a rejection of kindness itself. But over time, this pattern, this unconscious agreement to always agree, takes a toll. It builds slowly like drops filling a cup until one day you realize the cup is overflowing and you're the one left parched. You say yes to an invitation when what you need is solitude. You say yes to helping when your body aches for rest. You say yes to one more favor, one more call, one more task. Not from joy, but from the fear of disappointing someone. Della, now in her 80s, shared how this habit shaped decades of her life. I thought saying no was selfish, she said, like I was letting everyone down. But in truth, I was letting myself down over and over again. Her days became full, yet hollow. filled with good deeds that left her drained, surrounded by people who never truly asked if she was okay with what she gave. It wasn't until she started practicing honest boundaries, saying no gently without excuse or apology, that things changed. And not just externally. Her friendships became clearer, cleaner. The people who respected her choices stayed. Those who didn't slowly drifted away. It wasn't rejection, it was revelation. Saying no out of honesty isn't cruelty, it's courage. It's the brave act of recognizing that your energy, your time, and your peace are not unlimited. They are precious. And choosing to protect them is not a rejection of others. It's a deep honoring of yourself. When you start saying no from a place of clarity, your yes becomes more powerful, more genuine, more loving. And that shift creates space not just for rest or recovery, but for authenticity, for a life lived with inner alignment rather than quiet resentment. And now we turn to habit number 7, one of the quietest but most exhausting patterns we carry, the pursuit of approval. Approval is such a tricky thing. It often begins innocently enough. We want to be loved. We want to be seen. As children, we seek smiles from parents and gold stars from teachers. As adults, we aim to meet expectations, to say the right thing, wear the right clothes, achieve the right milestones. Somewhere along the way, though, this natural desire to connect gets twisted. It becomes a performance, a constant shaping of ourselves to fit into spaces, to avoid judgment, to win applause that never truly satisfies. What makes the approval trap so dangerous is how invisible it can be. You don't always realize you're caught in it. You just find yourself exhausted after social gatherings. You find yourself rehearsing conversations, second-guessing emails, overthinking how you looked, sounded, or came across. You suppress your opinions, silence your questions, laugh at things that don't feel funny, just to keep the peace, to make the call, to forgive yourself. And in doing so, you stop living under the weight of what was and begin walking toward what still can be. Because at the end of it all, the journey toward peace is not about adding more. It is about carrying less guilt, less fear, less armor. And as you begin releasing these 9 habits, the need to be right, the old grudges, the constant worrying, the comparisons, the perfectionism, the guilt-based yeses, the approval seeking, the material attachments, and the heavy cloak of regret, you begin to rediscover something that was always yours, but may have been buried beneath the noise: your lightness, your wholeness, your peace. So pause here and take a breath. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let that becoming be gentle. Let it be honest. And let it be yours. The final part of this reflection invites us into the quiet space between memory and meaning, where the past doesn't haunt but gently teaches, and where the future is no longer a threat, but a soft horizon. We've walked through the habits many older adults have learned to release, not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, like loosening a tight grip that's held on too long. Now we arrive at the culmination, the part where clarity settles in like early morning light and peace becomes something tangible, not just imagined. It begins with a single truth. Peace isn't something we chase down. It's what remains when we stop carrying what weighs us down. Think of Harold again, in his rocking chair, not reminiscing over what he achieved, but over what he finally laid down. His story is not about escape, but about arrival. Coming home to the self that's been there all along, beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the striving. This is the space we all long to enter. Let's pause and revisit those 9 quiet shifts, not as burdens, but as invitations. When we released the need to be right, we didn't lose strength. We gained presence. That release allowed us to stop arguing and start listening, to stop correcting and start connecting. It's a powerful lesson many elders carry gently in their conversations now, where more is said with silence than with endless talking. And when we let go of grudges, something remarkable happens. We soften. We don't forget and we don't excuse, but we let the pain float downstream instead of clutching it to our chests like armor. The forgiveness, as we've seen time and again, isn't for the other person, it's for our own freedom. That's not theory, it's lived truth echoed in every elder who has chosen peace over poison. Worry, once a constant hum in the background of every day, eventually fades too. Those who've reached their later years know with rare certainty that worry rarely prevented pain, but it often prevented joy. It cluttered peaceful mornings, clouded moments of laughter, and inserted itself into memories where it didn't belong. But in its absence, there is a spaciousness, a new kind of strength. The strength of being here, fully, gratefully, and without the need to control every possible future. That insight, like a hidden door, reveals something even deeper. Life doesn't reward us for worrying. It rewards us for noticing. Noticing the warmth of a hand, the way light hits the table at dusk, the comfort of familiar voices. These are the moments worth protecting, not with fear, but with presence. Then there's comparison, the quiet thief that creeps in disguised as curiosity. Did I do enough? Did I live as well as they did? These questions melt away when we realize that peace is not a competition. The elders who've learned to stop measuring themselves by someone else's journey often say the same thing. I finally saw what was mine. Whether it was a garden, a grandchild's laugh, a morning ritual, or simply the rhythm of their own breath, it was always enough. Not because it looked like someone else's life, but because it was lived with care and honesty. The beauty of letting go of comparison is that we're free to celebrate others without diminishing ourselves. We become more generous with our love, more open with our appreciation, and more deeply rooted in our own stories. And perfectionism, that old voice that whispered almost for decades, loses its power when we begin to value progress over performance. The artist who never shared his sketches finally paints. The mother who always thought she could have done more realizes her presence was the gift. Perfectionism often begins as ambition, but calcifies into paralysis. It traps us in the waiting room of our lives. But once released, it opens a door to real joy. Joy that lives in imperfection, in laughter that's too loud, in messy rooms filled with real conversation, in love that shows up flawed and honest. The elders who gave up on perfection didn't give up on excellence. They just redefined it. Excellence, they learned, is found in authenticity, in effort, and in the quiet bravery of showing up exactly as we are. And what about the yeses we've said out of guilt? The favors, the events, the conversations we endured to avoid disappointing others? With age, often comes the realization that these agreements, well meant or not, created a life filled with quiet resentment. But those who have learned to say no with kindness, without shame, speak of a deep shift. They feel lighter, not because they love less, but because they love more truthfully. They show up where they want to be. They rest when they need to. They give from fullness instead of fear. And that change, subtle but radical, leaves room for peace to enter like sunlight through a newly opened window. Approval, too, loses its shine. The applause, the praise, the validation, once chased like treasure, now seems distant, even hollow. Older adults who've released the habit of molding themselves for others talk often about how freeing it is to simply be, to dress for comfort, not for appearance, to speak their truth even when it wavers, to smile when they feel joy, not to please, not to pacify, but because it rises from within. Authenticity, they've discovered, draws in deeper love, not the love of the crowd, but the love of those who truly see them. Family, friends, even strangers who are drawn not to a performance, but to a presence. And then there's the attachment to things. The clothes, the collections, the boxes full of yesterdays. At some point, the objects that once told our stories begin to blur them. They become weight instead of witness. Those who've downsized, physically, emotionally, spiritually, speak not of loss, but of liberation. They tell of rooms that breathe, of closets that close, of shelves that hold only what still matters. They understand that memory doesn't live in the object. It lives in the moment it shaped, in the story it tells, in the way it still lives inside us even when we no longer hold it in our hands. And finally, regret, the heaviest habit of all, the missed chances, the silence when we should have spoken, the words we said too harshly or not at all. Regret is a slow echo that repeats itself over time, growing louder in stillness. But even here, there is room for release, not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by choosing to live differently now. Those who have faced their regrets head on know something sacred. There's always time to create new memories, to say what you meant, to love better, to listen more. And when they forgive themselves, as they so often do, they discover that regret, like every other habit we've explored, is only permanent if we choose to carry it forever. So here we are, at the end of the path that began with a man in a rocking chair, and the lightness he felt not in his body, but in his heart. The 9 habits, once thought to protect, define, and stabilize, have revealed their true nature. They weighed us down. They narrowed our vision. They offered comfort, but not clarity. But in their release, we find not emptiness, but spaciousness. Not loss, but return. A return to ease. A return to self. A return to peace. And that's the great truth hidden in all of this. Peace isn't a reward for living perfectly. It's the natural state that arises when we live honestly, when we say what we mean, when we forgive without demand, when we laugh freely, when we make space for breath, for truth, for love. The people who've lived the longest don't speak of the trophies they earned, the opinions they won, or the things they owned. They speak of moments, a morning without worry, a dinner filled with laughter, the quiet presence of someone who stayed. Now ask yourself again, which of these habits are you still carrying? Which one, if released today, not tomorrow, not eventually, but today, would give you even a little more peace? And if the answer comes softly, let it come. Let it guide you. Because this isn't about fixing everything. It's about shifting. Just enough. Just once. And then again. Until your life feels like something you no longer have to manage, but something you get to live. And maybe that's the real legacy. One not measured in years, but in ease. Not in possessions, but in presence. Not in striving, but in stillness. That's what Harold found in his final chapter, and what each of us can begin to find, right here, right now. So breathe, begin again, and remember, the door to peace is always open. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to let go, and the wisdom to walk through.